Welcome back to another episode of The Secrets of Koi Keeping. Today we're focusing on pricing and more specifically the price of koi. I believe this is a topic that causes a great deal of confusion for people because it's a very hard one to sort of unpick and get your head around at times. So I'm going to try and delve into it a little bit more for you to hopefully get a better understanding of what dictates what goes on in the price of koi. So yeah, sort of delving in first, I'm going to go straight into the sort of scene in Japan because this is where it all starts, and probably these are the people most responsible for causing a lot of the chaos in this, because really to understand something there's got to be some level of consistency that you can kind of pin a pattern to. Now I would say for me personally, with all the experience, we're talking over 20 years of visiting Japan, I have got to a point where I can understand and almost put a price on koi at times, but there are a lot of variable factors that really do come into play. Please don't be mistaken thinking people walk around Japan and there's a fixed price on a pond that people just pay, because there isn't. That can vary, there's a lot of people often in the chains making all this happen, so it can often happen, depending on who you're actually walking in a fish house with and what relationships that you've got, and actually whether a breeder will even want to sell you anything, full stop. Believe me, it can happen. A lot of these guys aren't desperate. They can pick and choose a lot, because supply and demand, it always seems to be the case. There's more demand than there is supply. So what you tend to find is with the smaller fish there's more consistency. So the sort of general breeders, the small fish, for years now, a lot of them are sort of quoted the same prices all along. The only thing that will generally influence the price of those when they come to market is shipping, which is always it can be a variable. It had been consistent for a lot of years, but in recent years with the closure of the Russian airspace and COVID and the lack of flights, again, supply and demand on air freight, the prices have absolutely soared. So that's changing a lot there. And depending where you are in the world as well, air freight differs in cost drastically. So we've got that one to consider. And obviously there's packing charges as well. That can depend different areas of Japan, different agents that you're using. There can be variable factors in amongst all that. And then as you move on the fish get into this country, you're obviously talking dealers needing to make a margin. Now this is, I feel like people don't like to talk about this and as if profit is a dirty word, but let me tell you, it would be very difficult to get the chain of supply that you've got and the choice of koi you've got in your respective countries without the network of dealers. In order for them dealers to keep doing what they're doing, fronting up huge sums of cash to bring in these shipments of koi, because it's a very cash-based business, it's going to be very hard for them guys to do it and not make any money. They need to make profit in order to survive, and I believe the majority of dealers out there are very fair in how they price fish, and not being particularly greedy, or I think there's some kind of perception that koi dealers make an absolute fortune, and let me tell you, from dealing with so many people, it's a bit of a hard slog, to be honest with you. It's a tough business. There's loads of cash flow pitfalls, and there's a lot to negotiate around. So that is important. Dealers need to make their cut as well, and that's what I say, for you to be able to go in there and purchase that one or two fish, they've often got to buy huge shipments, or at the very least a box or two of fish to put that selection on in order for you to go and get the ones that you want. So that's a very important part of the chain, and one where you get some variability, certainly in the smaller koi, but not as much as you will when you move up into the bigger individual pieces, because this is where the world really changes. And going back to the breeders, I've been in scenarios in Japan where we've looked at a fish one day, certainly during the autumn harvest where everything's fast paced, it's moving a lot. We've looked at a fish one day, got a price, gone back the next day having made no commitment, ask for the fish to be bowled, check the price again, and the price is altered. And it really can be like that. That's not every breeder, but I've experienced that at a few farms as well. Even been in one scenario where I was negotiating with a breeder and trying to get the price down because I was buying a few, and he actually put the price up right there in front of me, and that was a great one. I then had to spend about an hour negotiating with him to get the price back to where it was originally. So yeah, it's not the most, compared with some businesses where there's sort of set prices, there's sort of industry levels and base levels and things like that. We don't really have that in Koi. We are dealing with individuals, often just farmers, not particularly business people. And yeah, I mean, let's face it, that they are living jewels. A lot of them are a work of art, one-offs, and if the breeder's got it and you want it, he's pretty much in control in that situation. Now, I'm not endorsing it, I'm not saying it's right, but it is how it is. And yeah, like I say, it's not every breeder, but then this is where it can get really, really difficult for you trying to pick up on what's actually going on, because like I say, we can get price changes from one day to the next. Auctions have been introduced more and more these days, so that has ultimately pushed the base level prices up a little bit, I believe, because a lot of the best koi now just get stuck in the auctions where everyone has to fight for it a little bit, and that's got harder and harder. And then what that means is that those farms that are doing well with the auctions, if you want to buy fish outside of them, the sort of entry level costs have risen a bit in recent years as well, so we've got to factor that in. And then we've got the sort of variability amongst varieties and breeders, and it's important to know what's going on with trends as well, because I think we've seen a massive rise. The first one that comes to mind here is Benigoi, for example. So Benigoi for years have been a fish that were just rejected at sort of like the first rounds of cullings and gotten rid of. And yeah, that's really changed in recent years as sort of non-go Sankey have become really, really popular. Benigoi are just one example where this has happened. So from years back, these were a fish that were just rejected at the first round of culling, for example. And in recent years, the popularity and rise of non-go Sankey, they've become incredibly popular. Now, at Dainichi, for example, buying Benigoi is almost harder than buying the smaller Kohaku and Showa from year to year. It's absolutely insane that the base level price they command, especially when they're coming from a good parent set, is just insane. So if you're of the mindset going into it thinking, I want a Benigoi from a decent breeder, and you're expecting it just to be a sort of throwaway fish at a throwaway price, it's just simply not going to happen, because that's not what's happening in the market, full stop. Weird and Wonderful has been dominating for years now, because when you think about it, a lot of these fish are even more one-offs than a lot of the Go Sankey stuff that in relativity is produced in much bigger numbers every year. So this is why we're seeing the likes of Golden Corn, and then we've got Benikikuryus from Iokia, for example, all fetching serious prices when they come to auction. Often Otsuka for his Asagi and Akamatsuba, all of this stuff going absolutely crazy in the market. And it's because, yeah, the great examples are hard to get. The numbers just in general are much harder to produce, and then they have become really popular, so you've got the supply and demand issue in amongst it all as well. So we've got all these challenges that we face as new markets emerge. Vietnam in recent years has been buying vast quantities of fish, so all of a sudden we've got an issue there, and we're having to compete more and more, and breeders know that they can put a price out in terms, and you either like it or lump it, which then means no fish for us. So it's really, really fascinating what's going on in it all, but ultimately what this comes down to is making it very hard for you to generally follow what's going on, because then you've also got variations in prices from different breeders, which is natural. It's just like different brands in any industry. So if we do take a Kohaku, for example, you get a nice Nisai Kohaku with a certain criteria. That fish from somebody like Hoshikin, for example, or Marido, very top breeders, a good example from them is going to be pricey. But then if you take that same kind of quality of fish, almost maybe like for like in the sense of what you're looking at right in front of you, but get it from Dainichi, there's going to be a massive price difference there because of what that brand commands and the difference in genetics. It's kind of invisible stuff that you're paying for a little bit. So, and again, demand. It's just really just boiled back to that supply and demand thing all the time. But it's a really, really interesting subject. It can vary on seasonal elements, how busy a breeder is. Like I say, we always generally see a little bit of an uplift in price in autumn, because typically it's all new stock being harvested. It's a bit of a rat race getting the fish, so breeders know they can ask a bit more and they're likely to get it. But as soon as that sort of passes and the spring comes and all the best fish, so to speak, are gone, then all of a sudden we see a bit of a drop. So it can be, depending on the time of year when you buy in, that really impacts how much you're ultimately going to be paying as well. So much to it. yeah, really complicated subject, and like I say, I think it'll be hard for most people on your side of the fence to truly get your head around what you think the price should be. Ultimately, what it comes down to is you being happy with what's in front of you for what you're paying. And again, if you're trying to maximise your budget, there's some tips, in there. To be honest with you, I did a video, another one in the beginning. Sorry, the secrets of koi keeping. About selection, and there's some useful tips in there about helping you to sort of maximise your budget and get the most for the price. So that's worth considering as well, because there are other sort of taxing elements on the price, such as how finished a fish is. A show ready koi will command a higher price than something that's a little bit more raw and still needs the time and conditioning invested in it. So all these things factor in, but ultimately, like I say, you've got to be happy, and it's about you being smart and getting the most amount of koi for your money. And I think if you watch the other video, that'll go a long way to helping you. And yeah, to be honest, we follow a lot of the other content we do where it's a subject we talk about quite regularly. So I hope you found that helpful. I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. And in the meantime, we'll be hard producing some more episodes and be back soon.